She caught me crying behind the curtain. Mascara ruined. I begged her not to tell anyone what she saw. Everyone deserves someone who notices, she whispered, holding my hand. 3 months later, my mother found her number in my phone. Then my ex-fiancé's rival walked into our final dress rehearsal, smiling. The woman I loved had a secret bigger than mine. On opening night, one confession would change everything forever. My name is Maya Whitfield, 29 years old, stage manager at the Lakeside Repertory Theater in Chicago, daughter of a preacher's family from rural Georgia. 4 years I hid who I really was behind cue sheets and blackout curtains, terrified that loving a woman would cost me my entire family. Sloane Carter arrived in September, hired to direct our production of Autumn Vows, carrying 2 suitcases and a reputation for demanding perfection. I first saw her adjusting lighting cues alone at midnight, humming an old jazz tune under her breath, unaware anyone was watching. She caught me sobbing behind the stage curtain after a phone call from my mother about my cousin's engagement party invitation. "You don't have to explain," Sloane said quietly, offering me a tissue instead of questions I wasn't ready to answer. We started sharing coffee before rehearsals, discussing blocking and lighting, though our conversations always drifted somewhere more personal. She asked about my family once, and I changed the subject so fast she raised an eyebrow but let it go. Slowly, I learned she'd moved from Portland after a painful breakup she refused to discuss in detail. Something about her steadiness made the theater feel safer than my own apartment ever had. We stayed late rewriting scene transitions, our shoulders brushing over the same clipboard, neither of us moving away. One evening she walked me to my car and said, "You're the only person here who actually listens," and I blushed. I told myself it was professional admiration, nothing more. Though my heart argued differently every single time. By October, I found myself arriving early just to catch 10 quiet minutes alone with her before the cast arrived. Rehearsals became my favorite part of the day, not because of the play, but because Sloane always sat beside me during notes. She started leaving sticky notes on my script margins, small jokes hidden between blocking directions, making me smile at my desk. One rainy afternoon we got stuck in the theater lobby waiting out a storm, and she told me about growing up in Seattle. Her father was a jazz musician who never approved of her chosen career, and I recognized that ache immediately. "Families can love you and still refuse to see you," she said, and I nodded. Unable to speak past the lump in my throat, we began meeting outside work too, walking along the Chicago River Walk, talking until the streetlights flickered on above us. She never pushed me to open up, which somehow made me want to tell her everything about myself. I told her about my mother's church, about the sermons on marriage, about the silence I kept for 29 years. Sloane listened without flinching, then simply said, "Your story isn't shameful, Maya. It's just yours." That night I cried again, but this time it felt like relief instead of fear, and she held my hand through it. Weeks passed and our friendship deepened into something neither of us named, though we both felt it shifting. During a late rehearsal, our hands touched reaching for the same prop, and neither of us pulled away first. "I haven't felt this way in years," she admitted one night, staring at the empty stage instead of at me. I asked what happened to make her guard herself so carefully, and she only said, "Someone I trusted chose safety over me." I didn't press further, sensing old wounds beneath her calm exterior, wounds I recognized because I carried my own. One December evening, after the cast left, she pulled me gently backstage and asked if she could kiss me. I said yes before she finished the sentence, and for the first time in years, I stopped being afraid. That kiss felt like the curtain finally rising on a life I'd rehearsed alone for far too long. We kept our relationship quiet at the theater, stealing glances during tech runs, smiling at inside jokes only we understood. She started calling me every night after rehearsal, and I began falling asleep smiling instead of anxious for the first time in years. My mother called twice that week, asking if I'd found someone nice yet, and I lied and said I was busy with work. Sloan took me to a small jazz club downtown, and I finally understood why she loved music the way she did. "This is the happiest I've been in 3 years," she confessed, resting her head against my shoulder as the band played. I wanted to ask about those 3 years, but something in her voice told me to wait until she was ready. We spent Sundays exploring the city, avoiding questions about the future, content simply existing inside our fragile new happiness. I hid the relationship from my castmates, terrified that gossip would somehow reach my mother's church congregation back home. Sloan understood my caution, though I noticed sadness flicker across her face whenever I asked her to keep quiet at work. "I'm not ashamed of you," I told her one night. "I'm ashamed of what my family will do if they find out." She squeezed my hand and said she understood completely, having once hidden a relationship the same painful way herself. By January, rehearsals for Autumn Vows intensified, and so did the tenderness growing quietly between director and stage manager. We found small rituals: coffee before curtain, notes left in scripts, brief touches only visible to two people paying attention. I started imagining a future I'd never let myself picture before, one where I didn't have to choose between love and family. Sloan mentioned a producer joining our team soon, someone she used to work with in Portland, though her tone turned oddly flat. "His name is Devin," she said carefully. "We dated before I left the West Coast, and something cold settled in my stomach. I told myself it didn't matter, that the past was the past, though a small worry began quietly taking root. Sloan promised there was nothing left between them, just old history and unresolved awkwardness from a job gone wrong. I believed her. Mostly. Though I noticed she avoided mentioning Devin again after that single conversation. Valentine's Day arrived, and she surprised me with 2 tickets to a Sunday matinee neither of us had to work. We held hands in the dark theater, feeling ordinary and happy, the way I'd always secretly wanted love to feel. Afterward, she told me she loved me for the first time, quietly, like she'd been holding the words for weeks. I said it back without hesitation, surprised by how easily the truth came once I finally let myself say it. For a few golden weeks, nothing else mattered except rehearsals, stolen kisses, and late-night phone calls that stretched past midnight. My mother's calls grew more insistent, mentioning a family friend's son who would make a wonderful husband for me. I deflected every time, unwilling to shatter the fragile peace between my 2 separate lives just yet. Sloan noticed my growing tension whenever my phone rang with my mother's name, though she never pushed me to explain. "Whenever you're ready," she said one night, "I'll be here. Just don't disappear on me the way people usually do." I promised her I wouldn't, not realizing how difficult that promise would soon become to keep. Rehearsals moved into February with new intensity. Our director and stage manager routine tangled inseparably with our private happiness. I started believing, foolishly perhaps, that love this good could survive whatever came for it eventually. Then, one afternoon, a man walked into the theater lobby carrying a leather portfolio, introducing himself as our new producer, Devin Marsh. Sloane's face went pale the moment Devin walked in, and I understood immediately this wasn't a coincidence at all. He greeted her warmly, too warmly, calling her low the way only someone from a serious past relationship would dare. "Small industry," Sloane muttered afterward, though her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her production notes off the table. Devin started attending rehearsals daily, offering notes on staging that felt more like excuses to linger near Sloane. I watched him watch her, recognizing the hunger of someone who hadn't fully let go of what they'd lost. Meanwhile, my mother called with news that my cousin Kayla was engaged, insisting the whole family gather for a spring celebration. "Bring someone," she said pointedly. "There's a young man from the church, Marcus, who's been asking about you." I lied again, telling her I was too swamped with the show to think about dating anyone right now. Sloane grew quieter after Devin's arrival, staying later at the theater alone, avoiding our usual evening walks together. "Is everything okay between you two?" I finally asked, unable to ignore the tension radiating whenever Devin entered a room. He wants to talk about us, she admitted reluctantly. About trying again. Now that we're working together. My stomach dropped. Jealousy and fear tangling together as I searched her face for reassurance she didn't immediately offer. I already told him no, she said quickly. But the hesitation before her answer lingered painfully in my mind. I tried trusting her, reminding myself she chose me. Though old insecurities I thought I'd buried began resurfacing at night. My brother Caleb called unexpectedly, asking why I'd been distant, saying Mom suspected I was hiding something from the family. Panic. Deflecting his questions, terrified my careful separation between Chicago and Georgia was starting to collapse. Devin cornered Sloan after rehearsal one evening, and I overheard him say, "You never really moved on. Admit it." I stood frozen backstage, listening to silence stretch too long before Sloan finally told him to leave her alone. She found me afterward, apologizing for the awkward scene, insisting Devin's feelings were his problem, not something between us. I wanted to believe her completely, but doubt had already planted itself somewhere deep inside my chest. The theater board announced our production would open in 6 weeks, raising the professional stakes for everyone involved simultaneously. Devin began undermining small decisions Sloan made, questioning her authority in meetings, making rehearsals feel tense and combative. I stayed close to Sloan during breaks, silently supporting her, though I noticed castmates starting to whisper about our closeness. One assistant stage manager, Priya, pulled me aside and asked bluntly if something romantic was happening between me and our director. I denied it instinctively, panic flooding my chest at the thought of rumors reaching my family before I was ready. Sloan overheard part of my denial and looked hurt, though she said nothing, simply returning to her director's notes. That night, I apologized, explaining my fear wasn't about her, but about losing my family if the truth spread too fast. "I understand fear," she said softly, "but I need to know you're not ashamed of loving me." Maya promised I wasn't, though guilt gnawed at me for the way I'd flinched when Priya asked her question. My mother called again, this time crying, saying Aunt Ruth had passed away suddenly and the funeral was set for March. I flew home for the funeral, leaving Sloan and the unresolved Devin tension behind in Chicago for an entire week. At the funeral, I discovered old photographs of Aunt Ruth and a woman named Constance, tucked inside a forgotten shoebox. My grandmother whispered that Ruth and Constance had lived together for 30 years, though the family never spoke the truth aloud. "She died alone in that house," Grandma said sadly, "because we were all too afraid to ask her the real question." Something in me cracked hearing that story, recognizing the silence I'd inherited without ever choosing it myself. I returned to Chicago changed, determined not to repeat Aunt Ruth's quiet, lonely ending inside my own life. But Sloan seemed distant when I arrived back, distracted by continued pressure from Devin regarding the production's final budget decisions. "He's threatening to pull funding unless I give him more creative control," she confessed, exhaustion evident across her face. I offered to help however I could, though I sensed she was carrying more weight than she admitted to me. Rehearsals grew tense as opening night approached, cast members sensing the strain between our director and her demanding producer. Devin requested a private dinner meeting with Sloan to discuss the show's future, and she reluctantly agreed to attend. I tried hiding my jealousy, though it curdled uncomfortably in my stomach as she left the theater that evening. She texted afterward saying dinner was strictly business, but something about her tone felt guarded, careful, slightly too rehearsed. I told myself I was overreacting, that trust meant believing her even when old fears whispered otherwise inside my mind. Meanwhile, my mother mentioned Marcus again, saying he'd be attending Kayla's wedding and specifically hoped to see me there. I finally admitted to my mother, gently, that I wasn't interested in meeting anyone right now, romantically or otherwise. "You're 29. Maya," she snapped. You can't avoid this forever. What will people at church even think? I hung up shaking, torn between the life I was quietly building and the family expecting me to abandon it. Sloane found me crying backstage again, exactly like the first night we met. Except this time the tears felt heavier. Tell me what's really going on, she said gently. And for the first time, I told her everything about my family. I told Sloane about Aunt Ruth, about my mother's ultimatums, about a lifetime spent shrinking myself smaller to survive. She held me tightly, promising she wasn't going anywhere, no matter how complicated my family situation became. The next weekend, my brother Caleb visited Chicago unexpectedly, saying Mom sent him to check on me before the wedding. He found a photo on my unlocked phone, Sloane and me laughing together, clearly more than just coworkers. Is this what you've been hiding? He asked quietly, more confused than angry, studying my face for answers. I told him the truth, finally, voice shaking, admitting I loved a woman named Sloane Carter with my whole heart. Caleb sat silent for a long moment before saying, I won't tell Mom. But you need to tell her yourself. Maya. I thanked him through tears, grateful for unexpected grace, though terror about telling my mother still consumed me completely. Days later, Kayla's wedding invitation arrived with a formal note asking me to confirm attendance. +1, underlined twice. I asked Sloane if she'd come with me to Georgia, bracing myself for rejection given everything we'd already survived together. Are you sure? She asked carefully. And I nodded, realizing I was finally ready to stop hiding who I loved. Before we could plan the trip, disaster struck backstage. Someone leaked a photo of Sloane and me kissing to a local blog. The theater board called an emergency meeting, questioning whether a romantic relationship between director and stage manager violated production policy. Devin sat silently through the meeting, and I initially assumed he'd leaked the photo out of jealousy or revenge. Sloane defended our relationship fiercely, insisting nothing unprofessional had occurred despite the personal feelings we developed for each other. The board suspended judgment until after opening night, warning that further complications could jeopardize the entire production's funding. Furious and scared, I confronted Devin directly, accusing him of sabotaging us out of bitterness over losing Sloane. It wasn't me, he said firmly. I've been trying to protect Sloane from someone else this whole time. Actually, confused, I demanded he explain himself instead of hiding behind vague accusations that made no sense to me. Devin revealed that Priya, our assistant stage manager, had been quietly documenting our relationship for weeks, hoping for a promotion. Priya wanted Sloane's position, believing that scandal would force the board to replace her with someone more reliable. I felt sick realizing someone I trusted daily had been watching us, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. Sloane confronted Priya privately, and she eventually admitted everything, though she showed little remorse for what she'd done. The board ultimately dismissed Priya for unprofessional conduct, though the damage to Sloane's reputation had already partially spread. Meanwhile, my mother saw the leaked photo online, forwarded innocently by a distant cousin who didn't realize what it meant. She called me screaming, asking if the woman in the photograph was some kind of sick joke I was playing. I finally told her the truth directly, my voice steady despite years of fear crashing down all at once. I'm gay. Mom. I have been my whole life. Sloane isn't a joke. She's the person I love. Silence stretched across the phone line so long I thought she'd hung up on me entirely without another word. Don't come to the wedding, she finally said, voice breaking. I can't have this conversation in front of everyone. I hung up devastated, collapsing into Sloane's arms backstage, sobbing harder than I had in years, maybe ever. I'm so sorry, Sloane whispered, holding me together while my entire foundation felt like it was crumbling beneath me. Devin, surprisingly, offered quiet support too, admitting he understood family rejection after his own parents disowned him years earlier. It gets easier, he said gently, not because it stops hurting, but because you build a new family eventually. I appreciated his honesty, realizing I'd misjudged him completely based on jealousy that never fully belonged to him. Rehearsals continued despite the chaos, though I felt hollow performing my duties while my personal world quietly fell apart. Sloane suggested postponing our relationship's public visibility until after opening night, worried the scandal might sink the entire show. I agreed reluctantly, though the suggestion felt like another version of hiding, another rehearsal for disappearing myself again. 2 weeks before opening night, my father called unexpectedly, his voice calmer than my mother's had been. "Your mother told me everything," he said slowly. "I need time, Maya. But I don't want to lose my daughter." Cried again, this time from cautious hope instead of pure grief, clinging to his small offering of patience. Grandma called too, gently mentioning Aunt Ruth again, saying she wished she'd shown Ruth the courage I was showing now. "Don't wait like she did," Grandma warned. "Don't let fear steal decades from you the way it stole them from her." Her words settled deep inside me, strengthening resolve I didn't fully realize I still needed during those exhausting weeks. Sloane and I grew closer despite everything, clinging tighter as opening night approached amid mounting personal and professional pressure. The board finally cleared us of misconduct, acknowledging Priya's manipulation and confirming no policy violation had actually occurred. Relief washed through the theater, though tension between Sloane and Devin lingered, complicated by unresolved history neither fully addressed. "I need closure with him," Sloane admitted one night. "Not for us, but so I can finally move forward completely." She met Devin for coffee, and afterward told me they'd agreed to remain colleagues, nothing more. Permanently settled. With 1 week until opening night, I received a letter from my mother, unsigned, containing only a single sentence. The letter read simply, "I don't understand it, but I don't want to lose you either. I'm trying. Maya." I read it a dozen times, unsure whether to feel hope or heartbreak, tears blurring the careful handwriting. I called my mother, and though the conversation was awkward and stilted, we spoke longer than we had in months. "I'm not ready to meet her," she admitted, "but I'm not ready to lose you either. Give me time." I accepted that fragile truce, understanding healing rarely arrives instantly, especially after decades of unspoken silence between us. Opening night finally arrived, the theater buzzing with nervous energy as cast and crew prepared for months of work. Sloane found me backstage, adjusting my collar gently, whispering, "Whatever happens tonight, I'm proud of who you've become." I kissed her quickly before the curtain rose, no longer caring who might notice us standing close together. The performance ran flawlessly, the audience captivated by Autumn Vows, a story about love surviving unbearable circumstances. Backstage during intermission, an usher told me someone was asking for me by name at the front entrance. My heart pounded as I walked out, uncertain who could possibly be waiting, given everything happening lately. My father stood there awkwardly, wearing his good church suit, holding a small bouquet of white daisies nervously. "Your mother couldn't come yet," he said quietly, "but I told her I needed to see this for myself." I hugged him tightly, unable to speak, grateful he'd made the difficult journey from Georgia despite everything unresolved between us. He watched the second act from the front row, and I saw him wipe his eyes during the final scene. After the curtain call, he approached Sloane directly, extending his hand and saying, "Thank you for loving my daughter well." Sloane, done, shook his hand firmly, promising she would always try her best to deserve that trust completely. Backstage celebration erupted around us, cast members hugging, Devin congratulating Sloane genuinely, the earlier tension finally dissolving completely. My father pulled me aside, admitting he'd known about Aunt Ruth for years but had been too afraid to say anything. "I watched my sister die lonely," he said, voice breaking. "I refused to watch that happen to my daughter too." Cried again, but this time surrounded by celebration instead of isolation. surrounded by people finally choosing love over fear. 2 days later, my mother called, her voice trembling, asking if she could meet Sloan properly over dinner sometime soon. I agreed cautiously, hopeful but guarded, understanding forgiveness would take patient, deliberate steps rather than one dramatic gesture. The dinner happened a month later, tense at first, though my mother slowly softened watching Sloane's genuine care for me. "You make her laugh the way she used to as a little girl," my mother admitted quietly toward the evening's end. It wasn't full acceptance yet, but it was a door opening after years of being firmly, painfully closed. The theater board, impressed by our production's success, offered Sloan a permanent directing contract for the following season. She accepted, choosing to stay in Chicago, choosing our shared life over uncertainty, over old ghosts, over fear itself. Devin eventually moved to New York, sending an occasional friendly email, no longer haunted by unresolved feelings from his past. Priya, humbled by consequences, reportedly found work at a smaller theater, learning slowly that ambition without integrity costs everything. My grandmother visited Aunt Ruth's grave with me that spring, finally saying aloud, "I'm sorry we let you disappear." We planted daisies beside the headstone, Constance's name still missing from the marker, though we promised to add it someday. Sloan held my hand throughout the visit, understanding without words how much healing that quiet cemetery moment represented. 6 months later, my mother attended a performance for the first time, sitting beside my father in the front row. Afterward, she hugged Sloan stiffly but genuinely, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. Though Sloan smiled softly afterward. She said, "Welcome to the family," Sloan told me later, tears gathering in her eyes as she said it. I finally understood that courage doesn't erase fear entirely. It simply teaches you to keep moving forward despite it. Standing backstage a year later, watching Sloan direct our new production, I realized I no longer needed anyone's permission to be happy. I was Maya Whitfield, a lesbian woman loved fully by her family, and by the woman who once caught me crying in the dark. Andy.